So welcome everybody to this latest video on 162 Maths, and in this video we'll be looking at the second part of the laws of indices, which focuses on fractional indices and negative indices and the combination of the two. So looking at negative and fractional powers, now rule 6 was covered in the previous video, so let's just have a quick sort of notation of what this actually means. So anything with a negative power basically means the reciprocal of that base and the power. So the minus just simply means 1 over. And then all I then need to do is take the base number, raise it to the power, so this is going to be a to the power of b, and that there is your final answer. Now what you then might want to do is you may want to simplify this if it's a number or if it's something that can be simplified. So a few examples. So here if we had 8 to the power of minus 2, well that's going to be 1 over 8 squared, which is 1 over 64. If I had, let's say, 2 to the power of minus 4, well, that's going to be 1 over 2 to the power of 4, which is 1 over 16. If I had 3 to the power of minus 3, then that's going to be 1 over 3 squared, which is 1 over 27. And there you go. So the negative just means 1 over. Now when we start moving on to fractional powers, then basically it's important you recognise what the fraction actually does. Now this can be done in two parts. Now the numerator in the fraction represents the power or the index, and the denominator, so the c, represents the root. Now obviously if you watch the video on powers and roots, that we can have multiple roots. The most common ones are square roots, but you can also have cube roots, you can also have quad roots. And if you look on your calculator, you may have a button that looks like this, in which you can enter multiple roots on your calculator, or it might be represented like so with the x and y, maybe the other way around. And again, you might just have to practice how you press that button, whether you enter the numbers then press the button, or whether you press the button first and then work it out. But again, you can work with multiple numbers. But the key thing to remember here is that in the fraction, the top number always represents the power and the bottom number always represents the roots. Now in terms of common fractional powers, anything to the power of a half is basically going to be the square root of that base number. And anything to the power of a third is going to be the cube root of that number, because again here there is no power, because here we've got a 1 in each of these, and we've got a square root is 2 and a square root where the denominator is going to be a 3. So for example, if I had 36 to the power of a half, that basically means the square root of 36, which therefore equals 6. Now do you have to write the 2? No, because it's kind of common that square root is basically thinking of two base numbers being multiplied together. Again, for here, if I had 27 to the power of a third, well, that's going to be the cube root of 27, which we should know is being 3. So let's have a look at some examples. So again, of explaining what these are and how to write them. So x to the power of a half is just going to be the square root of x. A to the power of 3 over 2, well, that's going to be a to the power of 3 square rooted. If you want to write little 2, that's absolutely fine, but again it's not necessary when you are square rooting. Now another question is when we move on to numbers, which I will do in a second, so let's just finish this off. So I've got b to the power of 4/5, so that's going to be b to the power of 5 to the root of 4. And here a to the power of a quarter, well that's going to be a to the power of 1, if you want to write 1 that's fine, to the root of 4. Now in terms of numbers, let's say, and there should be, oh there's some, no there's not, let's have a look at some actual numbered questions. So if I had, let's say, 8 to the power of 2 thirds. So what does this mean? Well, I'm going to write down what it means. So this means 8 squared cube rooted. Now the question is, which one do you do first? Now depending on the number, well, 8 is a cube number, it's also something that you should be able to square because it's within our 1 to 16 numbers. Now it doesn't really matter which one you do first, so it doesn't matter whether you root or raise to the power first. However, you will find one being easier than the other. So here, again, if I did the power first, I've got 3 and 8 squared is 64. Can I cube root 64? Yes, I can. So the answer is 4. If I then, let's say, did the cube root first, then 8 cubed is going to give me 2, and 2 squared is 4. So you can see how it gives me the same answer regardless of which one I do first. But when you end up with bigger numbers, you may find it easier to do one or the other first. So for example, if I had 125 to the power of 2/3, then here that means the cube root of 125 squared. Now, do I know what 125 squared is? Not off the top of my head, but I could easily work it out. But do I know the cube root of 125? Well, yes, because that is a cube number I should know. So that's going to be the same as 5 squared. I do know how to square 5, so that's 25, and there is my final answer. So squaring probably wouldn't be the best option here because it's a lot easier to cube than it would be to square, cube root I should say, than to square. So let's now have a look at negative fractional powers, combining the two things together. So what happens here? Well, nothing much to be honest. All I'm doing is combining the two rules together. So a to the power of minus b over c. So again, b is my power and c is my root. So what this all means, it means the minus means 1 over. The b, well, I've got a, so let's just write a first. So b represents the power, which is to the power of b, and c, let's use yellow because I've done that, let's use the screen here, and the c represents the root. So that is what it then looks like. So what I then now need to do is just to work that out if I can. So for example, some examples, let's go for a to the power of minus 3 over 2. What does that mean? Well, that means 1 over, which is the minus, a, I've got to the power of 3 square rooted. And that's basically what that therefore means. And then obviously that can then go on to simplify it. If I had b to the power of minus 7 over 2, well then what does that mean? Well, the minus means 1 over. I've got b to the power of 7, and then again it's square rooted, and then I can then leave it as that, or I can work it out. Now in some cases, more high level GCSEs, you may have to go from the final answer to write it in indices form. So for example, if I had, let's say, a to the power of minus, let's say I wanted to write this as an indice. So let's go for 1 over 4th root of a to the power of 7. Well, because we've got a 1 over, well, my base number is a. Now, because I've got a 1 over, that means it's going to be a minus. And then because I've got a power and a root, means I'm going to have a fraction. So here the power is 7, so 7 goes to the top, and the root is 4. And so there is my final answer. So it's about not just working one way. Sometimes you may get questions that require you to work in the opposite direction as well. So let's have a look at these examples of trying to explain what they mean. So here with this first one, again, let's start by writing what it is. So this is, well, the minus means 1 over. I've got a base number of 36. Now here I've tackled the 1, so now it's going to be, there's a root of 2, so it's going to be square rooted, and I've got a power of 1. So again, working this out, 36 to the power of 1 is just itself. So the square root of 36 is 6, so the final answer is just going to be 1 over 6. Looking at this second one, I've got 1 over, and it's going to be 8. Now I've got a square root, and I've got a power of 3. Now with this one, I can't sort of square root 8 because it's not a square number. So what I'm going to do is just raise 8 to the power of 3. So for this one here, what I'm then going to do is then work out what 8 cubed is. Again, if you're not sure if it's on a non-calculator, basically it's going to be 64 times 8, but just work that out. And 8 times 48, so it's 512. So it's going to be the square root, 1 over the square root of 512. Moving on to our next one. So here I've got 1 over again because it's minus 32 to the power of 3 to the root of 5. Now with 32s, it's just a case of recognizing, well, is that 2 to the power of 5 is what I'm thinking. So let's think about doing the root first. So here that is going to be 2, so that is going to be, or 32 to root of 5 is going to be 2. So here I've got 1 over 2 cubed, and then I just do the cube of 2, which is 1 over 8. And then finally, 27 to the power of minus 1 over 3, well, that's going to be 1 over 27 to the third. Now obviously, but anything to the power of third, it just means the cube root of 27. The cube root of 27 is 3, so there is my final answer.